Écoutez le monde vétérinaire autrement sur Veto Micro, un podcast produit par Thémavet.
Bonjour, je suis Colline Musel, vétérinaire, coach, formatrice et cofondatrice de Wondervet.
Et moi je suis Marine Slove, vétérinaire, entrepreneur, podcasteuse et fondatrice de Thémavet.
Bienvenue sur le podcast numéro 1 de la profession qui démontre qu'il y a 1000 façons d'être vétérinaire. Vous entendrez ici des consoeurs et des confrères, qu'ils soient praticiens ou non, raconter leur parcours professionnel, leurs réussites et les joies qui vont avec, mais aussi leurs difficultés et leurs échecs.
C'est toujours avec le même enthousiasme que nous prêtons notre micro aux vétérinaires pour la 3e saison consécutive, pour continuer à nous raconter tels que nous sommes vraiment, interroger notre quotidien professionnel bien sûr, mais aussi et avant tout notre rapport à la vie, au monde animal et à la planète.
Le tout saupoudré d'une bonne dose de déculpabilisation.
Vous êtes ici chez nous.
Mais surtout, vous êtes ici chez vous.
Belle écoute. Aujourd'hui, Colline et moi vous laissons en compagnie de Sophie Wilford, vétote multicasquette et multinationale, pour une aventure vétérinaire 100% internationale.
This week on Veto Micro, we are going international and heading to the UK to meet an ex-colleague and good friend of mine, Sarah Smith. Welcome, Sarah, and thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Oh, thank you, Sophie. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Sarah, you graduated in 2010 from Cambridge University in the UK, and you are an equine medicine specialist working in a private practice called B&W Equine Vets. You have worked entirely in equine practice since graduation with some first opinion work, but predominantly refer on teaching hospitals, university and private practice. You tell me you are particularly partial to a bit of cardiology, neonatology or critical care. Finally, you are also a mum of 2 small children and a spouse. You enjoy gardening and cooking, though like many, you aspire to finding a little more spare time for activities such as yoga, running and tennis. Sarah, thanks again for joining me. Are you ready?
Yes, I am ready.
So we'll start off with our first traditional question, which is why and when did you decide to become a vet?
Oh, certainly when I was a child, I think my mum and my oldest sister are both doctors. So there was a very heavy medicine-based influence in our household when I was a child. I think part of me probably wanted to rebel and do something different. I think my mum spent a lot of time complaining about working in the NHS, which probably put me off being a doctor. My dad's family, people were farmers, and we all rode horses when we were a kid. So I think that all combined to me thinking being a vet would be a good idea. When I was a teenager, my dad definitely tried a little bit to put me off. He certainly pointed out the downsides, but I stuck with it. And here I
am. You studied in Cambridge, graduating in 2010. For our French listeners, what do Cambridge vet studies look like and how did they go for you?
Cambridge Vet School is quite... Well, I don't know. I worry if anyone's listening from there. I think the word would be old-fashioned or certainly traditional in the UK education system. Although to me, that I think is a good thing, not a bad thing. So the vet students and the medical students study together for the first 3 years. So for 3 years, you do sort of fairly hardcore science without much clinical stuff. Actually, I'm saying this in the present tense. This was obviously 20-something years ago. Yeah, 20 years ago. I think it's probably changed. Anyway, that's how it was. We did 3 years of mostly science, lectures, practicals. We were very fortunate to have these things called supervisions, often in the early evening, where there'd be a group of just 4 of you with one of the lecturers, like going over the material again. And then for the final 3 years, then we did lots and lots of clinical stuff. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was wonderful. It suited me very well. To me, it seemed a very logical way of learning. You learnt the facts and then you applied them to the clinical stuff. So yeah, I'm very grateful for that education. I think it was wonderful and I had a great time.
And at what point did you decide you wanted to go down the equine route?
I think I started vet school wanting to do that. And then I had various changes of heart along the way. I really enjoyed farm rotations and my farm EMS. So for a while, I thought maybe I would be a farm vet. And I really enjoyed small animal surgery, which now seems rather odd. I think equine medicine is probably as far away from small animal surgery as you can get. But I did really enjoy it. And for a while, I certainly had chosen small animal surgery as my final year elective. And I, in fact, did half the final year. Our elective was done in 2 4-week blocks. So I did 1 4-week block of soft tissue surgery. And then about Easter of my final year, I had some sort of change of heart. I don't know if it's just the sun came out and I thought I'd like to be outside. But I did the other half of the elective in equine. And then thought, well, maybe I'll get an equine internship. And with so many of these sort of momentary decisions in life, I was at this point, I don't know, I do really often in lectures, I find myself referencing this now incredibly old film called Sliding Doors. Have you seen it? Yes. Okay.
With Gwyneth Paltrow, no?
Yes. Probably no one listening will ever have seen it if they're younger than us because it's actually really old. Anyway, sorry, we digress. It's just a really good example of sort of this thing. If you just make one decision, I decided to change my elective, and probably really as a consequence of that, I've become an equine vet. And, everything unravels from there. And of course, I could have gone back on it, but it's just one decision.
And so you go straight into an internship when you graduate?
Yeah. And I think that suited me. I was not super confident at that stage. Or not. That's not fair. I was probably in general, I'm someone who has more internal confidence than external, if that makes sense. And it suited me well. You get lots more practical training. You're protected from the clients for a while. You can sort of hone your skills for a while without having Mrs. Jones breathing down your neck asking what you're doing or whether you've done this before. So yeah, it suited me really well from that point of view. And I went to Valley Equine Hospital in Lambourne, which was a smallish private practice. But I was predominantly supervised by a very lovely surgeon called Jessica Kidd, who let us do loads of stuff and probably struck a very good balance of supervising us and teaching us lots and making sure we did things well and properly, and also giving us a bit of a push to say, come on, get on, you can do that. You can do that on your own. Come on, you don't need me to help you with that. And giving us lots of confidence that actually we could do stuff on our own.
Was it a conscious decision to go down the private practice internship route, or?
I don't know, actually. I think I'd had a lot more exposure to private practice internships, I guess because I had seen practice in lots of private practice hospitals. And at Cambridge, if I'm honest, the Cambridge Equine Hospital wasn't very busy. And so their hospital internship at the time didn't look very appealing. I guess that sort of put me off teaching hospital internships.
So internship, 1 year, I take it. What happens? Yeah. What happens after that?
After that, I did probably the most terrifying 6 weeks of my life. I got a locum job at a quite big ambulatory practice called Fellows Farm in Huntingdon. They had about 9 or 10 ambulatory vets, I think. And every year, one of the partners would have a 6-week sabbatical over the summer. And so I got a locum job covering for this partner. And off I went in my car. I never left the safe. Actually, that's not true. As an intern, we did go out on the road to the racing yards and stuff, but to do things like give fluids or sedate horses for clipping and stuff. And so, yeah, off I went in my car. Well, actually, I think I borrowed my mum's car, which never smelled the same again. And yeah, it was terrifying. I had no idea. Well, it felt like I had no idea what I was doing a lot of the time. One of the other vets who worked there is actually now a medicine specialist. And he's a very lovely guy. And it feels in my mind like every evening I would come back to the practice and be like, okay, so today I saw this case and I did this, and I saw this case and I did this. And I would just literally every day download to him every case I'd seen and everything I'd done. And he had to say it was all okay, or tell me that tomorrow I should call the owner and do something different. I'm hoping that in reality I didn't actually do that every day for 6 weeks, but certainly that's how I remember. And I also remember very clearly someone else who's now a very good friend of mine. I said to her, Rhiannon, it says on this sheet for tomorrow, blood test ACTH. What's ACTH? And she was like, oh, right. And she went to the shelf and she took down the Vet Clinics of North America about equine endocrinology and just handed it over and said, you should read this. I'd done my internship in a predominantly racing sports horse and bolo private practice. I had really not seen a horse with Cushing's, it turned out.
No fluffy ponies.
No fluffy ponies. So that sort of makes me giggle, given that I ended up as a medicine specialist. But yeah, certainly a year after graduating, I didn't know what ACTH was. Also, I'm wondering if we should scratch that from the recording, Sophie. No, it's fine. Just being honest.
And so was it at that point that you decided to go down a medicine residency, or did you
no, I carried on a bit more experimentation? I carried on an ambulatory practice. I went then and did a year of ambulatory work at a lovely practice in Sussex called Mays and Scrine. They're really nice. They had pretty nice clients as clients go. They were very good at mixing that thing of support versus getting you some experience. I really enjoyed that. I would have probably happily stayed there, but that was a maternity cover. They didn't have a job after that. So I was looking around, wondering what to do next. Lots of jobs, wanted lots more experience than I had. The idea of a residency did seem fun, and when you saw specialists, their jobs looked quite fun. So I thought maybe that's what I would do. And off I trundled to apply for my medicine residency. And the rest is history.
The rest is history.
So that's where I met you.
Indeed. And did you was the first one you applied for, I believe, is that right?
Yes. I think I was a bit lucky, having subsequently heard other people's stories of residency application and stuff. I think I was a bit lucky. Yeah, I only applied to one place and one time, and that was it, which I think is unusual. I think I probably just, had a lucky day. So yeah, it makes it sound getting a residency easier than it probably is in most situations.
Internship and residency, what did you think then? And what do you think now with hindsight about them?
Oh, mine were very different experiences because my internship was in a pretty hectic, smallish private practice. So that was very hands-on practical skills, quite a bit of sort of firefighting of slightly suboptimal situations where you didn't have enough staff and things. But it was amazing as a first job from that point of view. And it gave me masses of confidence that I could deal with all sorts of bad situations. And it probably taught me a lot of, the old expression, I don't know, you have this in French, make like a swan, sailing on the surface and paddling like anything under the water.
Oh, yes. I don't know what the equivalent is, but I see what you mean.
I think it taught me quite a lot of that. Which is
Make it till you make it. No?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or just, keep the internal panic internal, which is a useful skill in our profession, I think. And then my residency was really a very different experience. It wasn't a big teaching hospital. I've realized now, actually, and I think only really recently have I realized this, doing a residency like that is a massive luxury. To have that kind of education where, for one case, depending how things go, the case might come in, you see the case with your senior medicine specialist, then it goes to imaging. So then you look at the images with an imaging specialist. Then maybe it needs an orthopedic consult. So you look at the horse with a surgeon or an orthopedic specialist. Maybe it has some surgery. I don't know. You carry on with the medicine specialist, or maybe it's got a heart problem and the small animal cardiology specialist comes to help as well. And then, I don't know, if the horse doesn't make it or if there's some complicated pathological thing going on, you might see the horse look at some slides or something with a pathologist or see a post-mortem with a pathologist. You have all these different people who are so specialized teaching you all at once. And at the time, I did not appreciate what an amazing thing that is. I mean, I enjoyed it hugely, but I didn't realize what a privilege it is to have that. I just thought this is interesting and fun and great. But now with hindsight, I realize actually that's really amazing. And yeah, I'm very grateful I had that opportunity. And yeah, in a different life, I think I would happily go back and work in a big teaching hospital. I'm not sure. I say that only really because I like where I live and I don't really want to move house. But if they opened a large teaching hospital in the small town of Stroud where I live, I'd be tempted. Yeah, it's an amazing environment to work in. It's obviously, sorry, you might, I feel like in a minute you'll be like, hang on a second, it wasn't all as glossy as you're making it sound. But that part of it is amazing.
And what What's made you realise that with hindsight, do you think?
Because now I'm in private practice. I have lovely colleagues. Yeah, I'm still lucky to work in a multidisciplinary team of specialists, but it's private practice. Everyone is busy. It's less the time for discussion and is less luxurious. So of course, if you want help, someone will always help you, and there's always someone to discuss things with, but not everything, and not in so much detail, not for the sake of education or for the sake of academic discussion. Whereas in a teaching hospital, people would discuss things for the sake of discussion almost.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And yeah, sometimes I miss that. Sometimes I'm looking at a horse thinking, I don't know, what's wrong with you? How I wish I had all those people around to just throw ideas about.
So when you finished your residency, I'm not sure you mentioned actually it was at the Royal College in London. What did you do after that?
At that point,
boards?
I think sat my boards. Well, I did the American boards, so I'd done them before I finished, which was again that was kind of nice. But that was probably for me the real moment of like, oh gosh, what do I do now? I didn't really know what to do. There didn't seem to be anything advertised that I really wanted to do. I had a real wobble at that point, probably of should I just go and do something completely different if I can't be a specialist in the way that I want to be. And then in order to just put that decision off, I stayed at the RVC just working for their ambulatory team, which just allowed me a bit of breathing space. It was a nice job. They were a nice team. I, lived in my same house amongst my friends. It was a year of just taking my foot off the gas. And during that time, I was very fortunate that a job I had always thought would be really amazing came up as a maternity job at Rossdale's Equine Hospital in Newmarket. And so after my year of ambulatory work at the RVC, off I went to Newmarket. And again, that was an incredible experience that maybe it was the sort of a specialist equivalent of that locum job I did after my internship, in that the day I started, I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? I'm not qualified for this job. I was covering for someone with 10 years of experience as a specialist and a huge reputation. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I should never have come here. This is going to be terrible. But actually, everyone was lovely and I had an amazing time. There's a very high caseload there, interesting cases, really great colleagues to discuss things with. I learned an enormous amount, and I feel very lucky that I did that job.
You said I can't remember exactly how you formulated it, but you said something about the job you imagined. What did you imagine the specialist job to be at that point, that you wanted anyway?
I find it almost hard to remember now. It's funny, isn't it? Because once you do a job, it's hard to remember what you thought it would be. I think I just wanted to work as a specialist in private practice. And in the UK at that time, there were very few specialist jobs. Equine medicine specialist jobs in private practice came up very infrequently. Also, actually, I'm being unfair, I suppose. For the type I wanted to be in a team of where there were other medicine specialists. I didn't want to be on my own. Because I thought at that stage that would probably be quite challenging. And there are very many opportunities for that.
And that's changed, of course.
Yeah.
Now
massive.
There's a lot more, yeah. And any ideas what you might have done if you mentioned changing completely, as in leaving the profession, or as in doing another job within the profession?
I'm not really sure, to be honest. I hadn't really got that far. I had looked at a few things. I'd looked at some things that would involve changing completely, working for a drug company, for example. I'd sort of considered that. But I hadn't got very far down the avenue of what I was going to do. I think a residency takes quite a lot out of you. It's quite busy. I was still in the phase of just sort of decompressing and reassessing the world, and something came along that meant I never got any further with those thoughts.
And from Rossdale's, you then went to B&W? Was that the sequence?
After that, I went to Bristol Vet School.
That's right.
So they had this slightly unusual setup where they had a private hospital owned by the university. They'd sort of privatized their teaching departments. So they had this thing called Langford Vets, which was technically a private equine hospital, but it was owned by the university and it really still functioned as a teaching hospital, if we're honest. So I went there. But I guess in a way, that moment when I left Newmarket was probably quite a good example of the sort of what happens if you're a specialist in terms of job choice. At the point at which I went to Bristol, the jobs that were advertised that were available were at Nottingham Vet School, Bristol Vet School, or there was the equine hospital in Qatar was advertising. So those were the 3 jobs I applied for, which if you are fussy about where you live or something, it's not much choice.
Yeah. And,
but I was
now. No, go ahead.
I was going to say I was fortunate to get the job in Bristol. I loved living in Bristol, and it was a lovely place to work. And then,
do most equine hospitals now have medics? Would you say?
Yeah, in the UK, yeah, certainly all the bigger ones, and actually some of a lot of the smaller ones would do as well now. Yeah.
Yep.
I was just going to say then my final move to date was that at the end of COVID, Bristol closed their equine hospital. And at that point, I moved to B&W, where I am now.
Where you've been for how long now? 4
years.
And how's the setup there? You're working with 2 other medics.
5 years,
right?
It was 2020, wasn't it? Yes, I work with 2 other medics, 4 surgeons, a sports medicine specialist, and an imaging specialist. So I feel very fortunate to be in a big-ish team. It's good fun. I like it. It's a nice caseload that suits me. We have a bit of everything. And generally a good proportion of clients with either insurance or enough money to spend to do the interesting investigations and treatment. And then I do 1 day a week at a different equine hospital owned by the same corporate down in Devon. And I enjoy that because they have a slightly different caseload. They have more national hunt racing and also a lot more hunting. Oh, actually, there's quite a lot of hunting around here. There's probably a different type of hunting down in Devon. Some of the clientele down there would be a little bit more, trying to think of the right way to put this. There's lots of farmers. They'd be a bit more pragmatic or
rural, yeah.
Yeah, a more rural mindset, exactly. So the decision-making about cases can be a bit different sometimes. And it's just interesting to have that contrast. I enjoy it.
Because the B&W, outside of the fact that they're corporate, they also have several branches, don't they?
Yes, yeah, they do.
Since, really getting, I guess, nose to the grindstone and going back into private practice, have you ever considered switching fields again or stepping away? I know obviously you've had 2 children, so you've had some maternity leave and time also to take some time out. But I don't know, how do you feel about that?
I guess there've been a few moments where that could have happened. Certainly, actually, when I finished my job in Newmarket, they were looking for a new pathologist, and we did have a sort of discussion about whether I could have stayed and moved into a more pathology-based role. And I didn't want to do that. I decided, actually, no, I really like clinical medicine. That's what I enjoy doing. I've not been at my residency that long. I want to keep doing this. So that was definitely a sort of active moment of, no, I'm going to stay doing medicine. And then probably again, when Bristol closed their vet school, and I was made redundant, for a while, I didn't have a job. And yeah, again, I definitely thought about, should I do something different? But again, I think I definitely still felt, no, I really like my job. I want to stay doing it if I can. So yeah, I guess I have had moments where I've thought about it or been forced to think about it. And at the moment, I still really enjoy it.
What is it you enjoy most?
I think I like it. It's a job with a lot of different challenges, which are good. There's the actual clinical work, which sometimes you sort of trundle through a week and think, gosh, I've done a lot of the same. I once knew a human ophthalmologist who just said, you've got to find a job where your baseline practical task is interesting to you. So for him, it was cataract surgery. And he said, I do X many hundreds of cataract surgeries a year, but I still find them interesting enough. You know, you're not going to find everyone fascinating, but as long as it's interesting enough, that's good. And so I guess the same has to be true for us of gastroscopy or whatever. And if Dicky's not listening, he would be mortified if I... Sorry, that's one of my colleagues who's like the king of gastroscopy. He'd be like, I can't believe you're saying gastroscopy is like your baseline boring task. But, you know, it's a sort of bread and butter task to me. But I do still really enjoy it. I still find that really interesting. And then aside from the practical stuff, there's your interactions with your colleagues. And I love my colleagues. They're great. The nurses are great fun. They're really interesting. And my specialist colleagues I get on with very well and really enjoy interacting with. We have lovely support staff, which I think actually that does make a huge difference. Our office team are excellent and really nice, which is unusual and really good. And the clients are a massive part of our job. On a bad day, sometimes I find them excessively challenging and frustrating. On a good day, they're just really lovely, great, and it's really interesting and fun to interact with different people with very different outlooks on life. And often sometimes it's somewhere in between. And I think actually client communication is something that I think continues to challenge us all and is an area that you probably almost... That's wrong. I was going to say it's almost a bigger challenge and a bigger area for improvement in clinical work. That's not true, but it certainly continues to stretch you as you go on. It's not something where you sort of sit down and think, oh yes, I've got this sussed.
Yeah, you said a really interesting thing in your bio about, you know, that your drive had changed over the years from patient care focus to an owner care focus. Can you expand on that a bit, perhaps?
Yeah, I think... Yeah, certainly. I think, you know, at vet school, I guess they do try and teach you lots these days about communication skills, but I still think, certainly for me, vet school was very animal focused. It was about the animal. And we had some communication skills lectures, but it was predominantly about the animal and what was wrong with it and all of that. And how you're going to make it better. And of course, that's still an enormous part of my job. But I would say it's now matched by an equal, if not bigger, part that is about the client. They are the person that brings the horse. And maybe that reflects the place I work. You know, if you work in a predominantly racing and breeding job, for example, actually those clients, it's probably not 50-50, is it? Because you will have a smaller number of clients, you'll know them better. So that interaction is less challenging. But in a I would say normal for this country, private practice, where you have a much bigger mixture of clients. We still have some stud clients and stuff, but we'd have lots of private owners. I would say then you're on this sort of 50-50 footing where half of your job is about the horse and half of your job is about interacting with the client and making sure. And there's lots of parts to that. And I do think we both worked during our residency with someone who I think was very, very good at this, in that he would always say at the end of a consultation with the client, can I just recap and ask you why you're here? And so for him, it wasn't just about what's wrong with the horse. It was also about what does the client want? Because it's all well and good you finding out what's wrong with their horse, but actually, I mean, the best case example, and I think this was often the case with some of his cases, and that's why he asked, if, for example, the horse actually has some sort of, I don't know, pain issue or something, but has become really dangerous to ride, if they are terrified of the horse, they're never going to get back on it, whatever you do. You need to know that at the beginning, because actually you can spend all the money in the world, but you're not going to solve their problem. And that's a very blunt example. I think there's often it's more complex than that, or yes, but that kind of stuff.
Makes sense. If you look at it the other way around, what do you wish horse owners understood better about their animals' care or about working with vets?
Oh, that's a great question. I could probably write a book in answer.
Yes, you've got 2 hours for the dissertation.
That's unfair. I'm being unfair. Most of them, they love their horses very much. They're very well-meaning. I think often they're really stressed when they come in. And I think it's important. I think it's easier to appreciate that for us when we're having a good day and, when we're under control and our stress is under control. If everyone's stressed, that doesn't go so well. So yeah, I think they're stressed when they come in, and I guess being able to alleviate some of that stress and help them to relax is good. It's not always possible. Understanding that it's not the same as at home. I think lots of them it's not a livery yard, and it functions very differently in many ways. How can I put that best? I'm trying to think of the right way to put that. I suppose it's actually the same if your dog is ill, your child is ill. You know, at home, you worry a lot about whether your horse has got the right hay net and how much hay they've eaten. And the same is true of your dog. Has they eaten its breakfast, your child, did they eat their porridge, whatever. Actually, once that horse is in a hospital, and the same is actually true of the dog or the child if they're really ill, it's no longer particularly important if they ate their porridge because they're really ill. They can go back to eating their porridge in a week or two's time when they're better. But for today, actually, there's lots of other things that matter, and that's what the vet or the doctor is worrying about. And maybe I've got a bit too engrossed in this particular example.
No, I get what you mean.
I think having children and actually taking them being ill, and one of them has spent, I'm very fortunate, only one night in hospital. But actually, it does wake you up to realizing it's the same thing. And if they're really poorly, they stop eating. But actually, that's okay. It doesn't matter. They'll come back to that in a week's time. There's all sorts of other things that matter in the meantime. But it's very easy as the sort of primary caregiver to get very hung up on those normal things. So yeah, helping them not to worry about that kind of stuff would be good. I think those are probably the main things. And the third and most obvious thing would just be, of course, we're trying to do our best to make them better. But thankfully, most of us do realise that.
You get that? Yes. And often if they look like they're not getting that, it's generally down to the fact that they're stressed and worried, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and also maybe that no one can do what they want. No one can work miracle.
Totally. 20 years since you said it yourself, since university. I think many things have evolved in the veterinary world since then. COVID, telemedicine, corporates, digitalization, to cite but a few. What's your perception of how things have changed? Do you think things have changed for the better, the worse? How they've impacted the equine field?
They've changed more than I thought when you put it like that, actually. It's easy to not notice. And I suppose it's easy not to notice because actually the two things I suppose that occupy my mind most of the time, which are what's wrong with my patient and my interactions with the clients, those things actually haven't changed very much. But the way that we do all that stuff has changed, I suppose, with all the things you described. I think that a lot of the profession has changed for the better. I probably came into it at a funny time. I think 20 years ago probably was on the cusp of this change already. I think people who were a little bit before me, the profession was very different. I probably came in on this wave of more female-dominated, more tech familiar kind of people. And so for me, some of that change is good. I guess one of the obvious examples would be that I have been able to have a family and, I was about to say, continue my career and my job. I mean, one of my children's only one, so we'll see how that plays out. But I feel positive, certainly currently, that will not be a significant negative in my career, which I think wouldn't have been true 20 or 30 years before. So that, and I would attribute some of that probably to the corporates, actually. I think they probably have had a positive impact on those sort of HR type things. All the digital things, I think they're interesting. I think there's probably going to be another massive round of change with that in the next 10 or 20 years. So I guess let's wait and see whether that's good. I think some of it's good. I think things like digital X-ray are amazing. I spend a lot of time with a very fancy ultrasound scanner, for which I'm very grateful. That kind of stuff I do think is really cool and allows us to keep improving and keep changing. And I mean, I think there are things that it's sort of funny to think, but there's various procedures which are already possible now because of the quality of the images that we can generate. For example, like C1, C2, CSF tap. It's not rocket science, and that's been around for probably at least a good decade. But when I moved to BMW, I said to one of my colleagues, let's do this. We can do it like this. It's really not that difficult. And she hadn't done it before. So I said, it's fine. I'll show you. And we got one scanner out and I looked with her and I was like, oh gosh, Actually, my confidence statement is not very difficult, relied on a very high quality scanner. With this scanner, it's almost impossible. And then we found a different scanner and it was fine. But that made me appreciate that actually that you're relying on this high quality equipment. And I'm probably a bit spoiled. I've worked in places in general that have good quality equipment. And so, the same would be true of TVEC, actually. If you're trying TVEC, again, I've done TVEC and we did compare sort of by choice, actually, two different scanners. One of them, you could barely see the wires. Obviously, that's useless. So yeah, those kind of advancements I think are amazing. I think the sad thing is probably the loss of the private practice that's owned by a team of partners, that sort of family vibe. And the the interactions with your colleagues and stuff that comes with that, I think is sad.
Do you think that's lost completely?
Yeah, I think so in this country. I think maybe it's a bit of a referral hospital viewpoint. I think there are private partner-owned or independently owned ambulatory practices that probably do still function like that. There is only one referral hospital that's still privately owned, as far as I'm aware. So I think it's certainly gone for referral hospitals. I guess I'm a bit of a, I don't know what the word is. I would say Pollyanna. Again, I don't know if that's something that translates. I guess my personality is to sort of move on and deal with life as it is. So I guess I have learned to appreciate the good things that have come from corporatization and things in general. I mean, we all from time to time will complain about X or Y, but I'd say there are good things that have come from it, and it allows people probably more freedom to do things like work part-time or change their role or whatever than it would have been historically.
Talking about being a mum, how has becoming a parent changed your view of your job or your sense of identity as a vet, perhaps?
Oh gosh, it definitely has changed it quite a lot, and more than I was prepared for, which maybe was a bit naive. I think it's changed, actually, when I was talking about the client thing, actually, that thing where I've become much more aware of the clients actually probably is a recent thing and a consequence partly of having children. I think it was developing before that, but I think it's become a lot more acute in the last few years because two things, probably. One, I've had a huge amount more interaction with human medical sector than I had ever had previously. I mean, really visited the GP a couple of times in my life. But once you're pregnant, have a baby, the small children are forever getting ill. I couldn't tell you how many times I've been to the doctor and even to the hospital in the last few years. So it's really given me much more experience of what it's like to be the patient or to be the primary caregiver of the patient. So my appreciation for the client's emotions and experience is much better than it was. What else was I? There was something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, and I think it's also probably changed my perspective on my work. And I tried to explain this to a colleague recently, and I think I didn't do it very well. It's not for a second that I care less about my job. It's more that it's given me a little bit more perspective. What's the right way to put this? That it's work.
Yeah.
My family are very important to me, and you only have a certain amount of sort of space for stuff to be important. So your job has to be a little bit less important than it was, because if we're sort of talking in percentages, it's had to give up some percentage for my family. But actually, I sometimes think that's a good thing. I think it's easy for us to be over-invested in our cases and our clients in a way that's not necessarily very healthy for anyone. And actually, I think maybe, I don't know, I think my colleagues would tell you, but I feel like maybe I've actually reached a more healthy sort of point where I'm very invested in my cases and my clients, but equally I then am able to say, but actually now it's the end of the day, someone else is on call, I've done my work, that's it, I'm going home.
Yes, you can sort of compartmentalize, is that the word?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's yeah,
I think there's a really good word for it, actually. You're right. I think my work has got a little bit more into its compartment, where it used to flow over into my personal life continuously.
Which, of course, it does a lot of, generally.
For everyone.
Being a vet, the admin stuff, the thinking about the owners, thinking about the patients, calling, even when you're not on call, I guess, calling in to see if, your patient's okay, all of that, I guess.
Yeah, which I used to do loads and I do now, less. And actually that's certainly the first time I was on maternity leave, I realized, and I was quite shocked, how much stuff we all do that is not part of our primary job, and or that our primary job spills over. And that maybe is a specialist thing a little bit more. I don't know. That's maybe unfair. But stuff like I was on Beaver Council, and I was still on Beaver Council when I went on maternity the first time, and we all review articles for journals and various things like that. You can actually accrue a huge amount of that stuff without noticing how much of it there is, and actually it takes up a lot of time.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's necessarily a specialist thing. I think it's perhaps the type of person who goes into veterinary, perhaps, and who always goes the extra mile.
Yeah, you're right. And maybe
there's a lot of that.
And I think it's a population also. Maybe we're not very good at saying no. Either because we don't want to inconvenience people, or because we have FOMO, fear of missing out. We think that it might be fun, or it might be interesting, or someone else might do it better if we don't do it.
Very true. What about the younger generations now coming through? How do they see the profession, or how do you see them seeing the profession?
Oh, I think that's a difficult question. I don't know that I want to represent their thoughts. I guess.
Yeah, sure.
I think they do have a different attitude that, and I'm a bit reluctant to say this because I feel like it's been very widely discussed in newspapers and things as a sort of generational thing. And I think some of that discussion has probably been quite unfair. I do think they have a different attitude about sort of working hours and how much they're going to be willing to let the job invade on their personal life, and how much sort of unpleasantness they're going to be willing to put up with for the sake of their work. And that's just different. I'm not sure it's wrong or bad. It's just very different. Certainly if I think back to my internship, I worked a 1 and 2 on-call rota for a year. And so if the other person went on holiday, I would just work on-call and daytime solid for, whatever that is, Friday when they were left, the weekend, the week, and the next weekend till the following Monday. So that's 10 days, 2 weeks. Like 12 days or something. I would just work 24 hours a day solid. And we just did that without questioning it. I'm not sure that's okay. I don't think that is okay. I don't think it was very safe at times. I don't think it was very good for people's patients. I don't think it was very good for us, probably. I certainly remember grazing a horse in a field that had colic or something, crying, just standing in a field with the horse crying because I was just so tired. I'm not someone who really cries very much. I'm not sort of standing in a field crying with the horses. For me, is very unusual. That's not really okay. So actually, for this generation to push back and say, I'm not doing that, I think that's okay. And maybe that's actually a good thing. I guess the difficult thing is finding that middle ground.
Yeah.
And actually, this has certainly been discussed in the human medicine field, that if you work a lot less hours, it takes a lot longer to reach the same level of clinical competency. And that, I think, is true. If the pushback is too far and the drop in workload is a lot, you're not going to get the same level of clinical skills and confidence as quickly. And I think that is a bit of an issue. I think I feel like sometimes now the generation that are coming through now are not very confident. Or they're very confident about some things, but very, very worried about others. And that worry, I think, can be quite stifling. It really hampers people's enjoyment of their job and probably knocks on into their personal life. If they're worrying a lot about their job, they can't relax and enjoy their evenings and their weekends and stuff. And that's really sad. We don't want anyone to be having to work like that. So I think it's on all of us probably to help people find a middle ground where they work pretty hard. I think, for me, I don't know, I still feel that model works quite well, where you work very hard or pretty hard, as a young vet so that you can get up to speed quickly and get that confidence to then enjoy your job. And then you can take your foot off the gas a bit and actually, you don't have to work so hard anymore because you've got those skills. And you're still going to work hard, but it's not the same. And then also you can enjoy your personal life a bit more. But maybe there's a middle ground where you don't, I think probably when we first graduated, we worked excessively hard. And was certainly, I think probably both acknowledge, both of our personal lives took a bit of a battering at times. And that's not a good thing. So yeah, it needs evened out. I think there's got to be quite a lot of hard work when you first graduate to get yourself upskilled and ready to face all those challenges confidently. And the reason for that is not to line your employer's pockets. It's so that you can enjoy your career, confident in your skills. But if that can be achieved without serious negative impacts on your personal life, then that'd be great.
Do you think there's also an element, you mentioned the time spent to get good at your job. Do you think there's also an element perhaps of exposure to adversity, that some exposure to adversity and challenges, almost too much, of course, can make you underconfident and, lose your confidence, but a little bit is enough also to help you gain more confidence because actually you've managed to deal with such and such a situation and got on with it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. You need those. And that's, I guess, where I was talking about, I think a while ago, I said that my primary supervisor during my internship, I felt was very good at that. She managed that boundary between making us deal with some adverse situations ourselves so that we knew that we could, versus when it was really adverse, obviously she helped us. That is exactly what you need. You need some, and probably a sort of escalating level of adverse situations. That is what our job is. I said earlier, gastroscopy is the sort of bread and butter, and you would hope not to encounter any adverse situation there. But we all have to deal with emergencies, or most of us, depending on your job. And even non-emergency cases, sometimes that something bad happens. And you need to be able to deal with that without it causing you significant personal stress or being stressed about it when you go home and things. So yeah, you need to just gradually be exposed to more and more of that. And to learn that you can deal with it.
Do young vets feel pressured into specializing, do you think?
No,
to increase their knowledge and...
I don't think so. I don't know. I just don't know that I can answer that question. I don't think I felt pressured into it. I think... Okay. I just thought it looked interesting. I don't know why I'm saying that in answer to do young vets feel anything. I'm certainly not young. I was one. I don't know. I'm sort of sorry. The reason I'm dithering is I wonder if there's a population of people who feel like nowadays you have to know everything. So maybe if you become a specialist, that will help with that. The sad truth is it won't. You will never know everything. You'll be a specialist and you'll be expected to know more. So it doesn't help. But I think the other population of people don't want that stress and responsibility. And maybe that population is bigger than it used to be.
What advice would you give to someone who sort of comes up to you and says that they want to go down the specialist route?
I guess that happens quite often. I guess I generally say I'm very fortunate. I really love my job and I have enjoyed almost all of the steps that have got me to here. I think I'm probably very fortunate and slightly unusual in that respect. I think it's a quite challenging path, and certainly a residency was hard. I know I went on about what a wonderful experience it is. No, I was just pointing out what a luxury it is. I think it's really, really hard, and you've got to be prepared for that. Is that? I'm now feeling some sort of amnesia about the question actually was.
What advice would you give to vets asking you advice on specializing if they want to go down the specialist route?
Think really carefully about your specialism. I think I didn't consider And I don't think I would go back and change my mind, but I didn't really think about the lifestyle impacts of different choices of specialism. So, for example, most internal medicine specialists, I would imagine, will find themselves doing quite a substantial amount on call for quite a lot of their professional life, because a big proportion of our work is emergency work. I mean, that's not true of everyone, but most medicine specialists do quite a lot of on call. Whereas, for example, diagnostic imaging specialists don't do, in general, any on call. And lots of them these days can work remotely. So that for some people might be a big deciding factor. And yeah, within small animal, obviously, there's more subspecialties, so that each role has a different lifestyle factors, and I definitely didn't really think about those.
Did you think about what the job would actually be after the residency?
Probably not that much. I think, like all of us, I think the same is true to a certain extent about going to vet school. My dad did try really hard to make me think about what life would be like as a vet. I remember it very clearly. And so he probably did it right, because I definitely remember him making me think about it. But I still probably slightly brushed off what he was trying to point out. And I think the same would be true of a residency. I just thought the process of doing a residency would be fun. And the specialists that I'd seen looked like they had quite jolly jobs. So I would give it a go. But
yeah, and there's an element of, I don't know, no, probably not. I think there's an element, especially when you're young, of you sort of have to go through it yourself. I think people can tell you till they're blue in the face that, you shouldn't do something, that will probably persuade you to do quite the contrary.
The arrogance of youth, exactly. You think
yes,
you know better.
Exactly. And it's about just getting your own experience, really, and making up your own mind and judgment.
Yeah, exactly. And I think actually it's all interesting education and opportunities, and it's all education that changes you. What you do with it afterwards doesn't necessarily matter. Is that the right way of phrasing it?
That's a very good way. I almost feel like I should, that's it, sign off now. But I do have another question for you before. If you met the young Sarah Smith, freshly graduated, what would you say to her?
Don't worry. Don't worry what other people think. Don't worry too much about whether you can do it. Try to enjoy the steps along the way. I think that's, don't be too worried about the goals at the end. Just enjoy the processes.
Enjoy the ride. I like that. Thanks, Sarah, for all these insights. Is there anything that we haven't chatted about that you would like to bring on the table?
No, I don't think so. My maternity leave mind is fairly slow at thinking, I'm afraid. So I think we probably covered everything.
Well, thank you. It's been lovely chatting to you. Lots of insights into the UK, the equine profession, your life, and much enjoyable catching up. So thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. I've enjoyed reflecting. Actually, it's not something I stop and do very often, so I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Merci d'avoir écouté cet épisode de Veto Micro. Si le cœur vous en dit, partagez-le à vos amis et à vos collègues, abonnez-vous au podcast et mettez-nous une note de 5 étoiles avec un gentil commentaire. C'est ce qui nous permet de remonter dans les classements et de donner de la voix à la profession. Si vous souhaitez participer à Veto Micro, nous suggérer des invités ou tout simplement nous écrire, faites-le sur l'adresse podcast@themavet.fr. Prenez soin de vous et à la semaine prochaine pour écouter une nouvelle façon d'être vétérinaire.